mamas, welcome back to another episode of Mom's Abilities. Today's episode is all about one topic which is kind of the biggest struggle or challenge, I would say, for new parents, especially within the first year of their baby's life. And I am talking about infant sleep. If you're a mom listening to this episode around 2 a.m. when your baby is not sleeping or you're rocking the baby, this might be very helpful for you. And I am joined today by Dr. EeVon Ling. She is the co founder of Your Downtown Doula. She is a naturopathic doctor, a labor and birth doula, and a sleep consultant and educator. I hope I covered it all. If I missed on something, Dr. EeVon, please feel free to introduce yourself to our audience so that they can follow.
Hi, Jaita. Thank you very much. I want to say hi to all the moms and babies out there. So my name, I just have everyone call me Yvonne. Yes, I'm one of the co-founders of Your Downtown Doula. And since we're talking about sleep, I guess I'll focus on that part of my training and experience. I'm a mom of two kids. They're teenagers now, 14 and 16. But my first one, and don't tell her I told all you this, but she was a terrible sleeper. So I totally understand what it's like. She woke up like every hour for the first several months. My second one, who's it's just a couple of years apart, she ended up being a good sleeper. So I felt like we put in the time and we were rewarded with a good sleeper the second time around. It doesn't always happen that way. Okay. So I want to warn your parents out there. In any case, my sleep consulting journey, like I do sleep consulting and educating, that sort of thing, actually didn't start until during COVID, actually. So I didn't know any of this stuff really until much later. And so during COVID, we had as you guys know or might remember, there's lockdown, and even naturopathic doctors, we couldn't practice. We couldn't practice at all. So during the time, like many other people thought, hey, let's get some additional training. I've been doing a lot of doula work and working with families, at that point. I've been a doula for over 13, 14 years now. And
Wow.
so, sleep is a really big struggle for everyone. And so decided to become a sleep consultant. Looked for lots of programs out there, and I did come across Isla Grace. That's kind of the name of the program. And the big one was basically advertising like gentle sleep without cried out, that sort of thing. Looked into It's very holistic, lots of guest speakers, even naturopathic doctors talking about feeding and tongue ties and, parenting and, mental health and all that stuff. So I thought it was really great.
How did you choose to get into this holistic approach where there's gentler methods? Is there any particular reason?
Well, I mean, being a naturopathic doctor, we already take a holistic
Yeah.
approach to begin with, right? So that's already
Yes.
the foundation I have coming into this. And I guess through my own experience, right? So I already, teased that my oldest was a terrible sleeper. And so people will ask, like, what did we do? And I will be completely candid. My husband and I, we did not want to do cried out, right? We felt it felt like it went against our own parenting instincts. But when your child is waking up every hour, and you just don't know, like you just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
You're just trying everything. So we did try like the gentle methods, and there were a bunch of books at the time, like No Tears, Sleep approach, things like that. And I guess we kind of joked to ourselves. We helped our child, gentle sleep methods to eventually prepare her for cried out. So we did do cried out. We did do cried out. It was really
Okay.
terrible. My husband and I, we were crying ourselves. We did it the one night. It did help improve her sleep a little bit. So I get why parents may end up doing it, because you do it out of desperation. But what we realized, it's not a one and done. Anytime, like when she became sick, I do remember like she became sick and then was back to, we had to comfort her. So it was back to waking up very frequently. And we're like, there is no way. We cannot go through that again. It just doesn't seem right. It's just, there's something bigger we need to look at. So did a little more digging and found some other methods to help get her to sleep, which really helped us.
Mm-hmm.
So then fast forward, now helping these families with their babies, a lot of them, I would say, after someone has a baby, the first uh, help that they want is breastfeeding. That is the number one. So our
True.
lactation team is very, very busy. But then
Mm-hmm.
the second most common service request was help with sleep.
Right.
And so me doing the training to become a sleep consultant was filling in this gap, like the need for help
Yeah.
that our families desperately need. And the more I got into it, the more you realize we're still the baby sleep industry, as I like to call it,
Yeah.
is still very based in like sleep training.
Mm-hmm.
We use these terms very loosely. Like, I want to start, when can I start sleep training is when,
Yeah.
parents will ask me when they
Right.
reach out. So that's kind of like my journey, my origin story, I guess, getting into becoming a sleep consultant and helping families.
I mean, honestly, Dr. Yvonne, I would like to thank you because being a new mom myself, I have been trying to do a lot of research, right, to help my baby with the challenges that he goes through, or even like as parents, the things that we are facing in the newborn phase, and now that he's 6 months. And I see how this industry, people are just trying to sleep train your child when you go for a consultation, right? But what you're doing is kind of educating parents, and that's the main reason I wanted to have this episode with you, that this has to be that episode where the parents get the education that they need, not just the resource like, okay, I need to sleep train my baby and how should I do it, what method, not jumping straight into what are the methods that I can look at, but instead trying to learn what really happens, right? We have to understand the baby. I mean, baby cannot communicate, all they can do is cry, and then that's how we have to like try to understand what's going on with them. So we are going to talk about a lot of things today, but before we dive into methodologies and what you do, I want to just help the listeners understand what is the science behind the infant sleep and why is it biologically normal for the baby waking up so often in the early days.
Yeah. So first I want to say, um, the the main foundation, the main reason why parents struggle so much with baby sleep is that the biological design and needs of the infant baby are directly opposite of the biological design and needs of the adult,
Adults.
right? So from the get-go, there is nothing wrong with
Mm-hmm.
your baby's sleep, right? There's nothing wrong with your baby's sleep. And at the same time, like two things can be true. There is nothing wrong for the parent wanting sleep for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? These two things are true, and they're opposite, like they work against each other, which is why we struggle so much, right? So if you look at the baby, there is a saying that goes something like, "There's no such thing as a baby; it's a baby and someone." Because the
Mm-hmm.
baby cannot survive, by themselves. And so the
Yeah.
baby's actually designed to do like the newborn. We're talking about newborn, the
Mm-hmm.
first 3 months,
Yeah. Okay.
which is real shock, right? I call it
Mm-hmm.
a learning cliff, right? It's not even a curve. It's like a cliff. We've got this wall, like, oh my God, I'm just being thrown into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
The newborn is biologically designed to do short periods of light sleep. So the whole statement sleep like a baby is a lie. It should actually be sleep like a teenager, because teenagers do long periods of deep sleep, but the baby does not, right? So they're designed to do short periods of light. They do sleep a lot, but it's frequent broken sleep, right? That
Right.
adds up to a lot. And the reason for this is they need to eat frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If a baby actually slept for 8 hours deep sleep at a time, they would actually not thrive, right? Because this would
Mm.
impact their ability to feed frequently, like to meet their caloric needs. And for the parent who is breastfeeding, right? So if we think about our biological, like what we're biologically originally able to do for
Mm-hmm.
breastfeeding, going that long period of time without feeding the baby will impact
The
breast
milk
milk
supply.
production.
Mm-hmm.
breast milk production, right?
Yeah.
So that's why. And the other part of this, aside from the need to eat, there's the
Mm-hmm.
development, right? So after the baby is born, there's a huge amount of development we can't even fathom, what's going on
Yeah.
physiologically, even at the cellular level, all this growth and development. And what that means is there's a lot of activity in the baby's body, especially their nervous system.
Mm.
I like to describe it as their nervous system is just buzzing with all this development, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, in order to meet this development, the baby's nervous system circulation has to increase activity. And this increased activity, again, interferes with sleep, right?
Mm.
So, in order to grow well, the baby actually needs to not sleep well. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the struggle that modern parents, especially in, and this is from a Western culture point of
Western culture,
view,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I'm based in Toronto, our team's based in the GTA. A lot of families here are on their own without
Mm.
extended help or family, and we don't have that village, right? So it takes a village to raise a child is very true, it becomes painfully true when you have that baby, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
realize I need a dozen, even if I had a dozen extra hands, you could still use more. You
Yeah.
could still use more, right? So that at the heart of it is the problem we're trying to solve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's not the baby's sleep is not a problem. The parent's need for sleep is not a problem. It's actually a lack of support
True. Yeah.
problem.
Mm-hmm. And when you said like it takes a village, we keep hearing this every time that it takes a village. The true meaning of a village is, see, me being a mom also, I thought like, okay, the baby is with me pretty much 24/7. And I don't want somebody to help me with the baby by taking the baby away, because as much as the baby needs me, I need the baby too. I remember in the early 2 weeks, like freshly 2 weeks postpartum, I was having the baby on me pretty much all the time. And I kept on hearing how babies still think that they are in the womb held by the mom. And I said, but I also feel like he's still a part of me. He's not out of me yet. So I cannot just put him down or let someone else take care of him. I have to keep him. But what really happens is that the village that we have, which families don't have now since everybody's living nuclearly, right? We don't get the support for other things that could have helped in the mom resting well, right? Even the dads, because mom and dads both are equally sleep deprived, right? And I understand when you say it's not something that parents are trying to fix with the baby, but it's rather like a convenience aspect. I remember when we had our call also before, it was such a great call, and I learned a lot in that few minutes of call as well, right? It's like almost like the convenience for the family, so that if everybody's sleeping well, they're going to function well. But then, as you mentioned, that we all know baby's appetite is so small, right? They have to feed frequently. And so if the baby is sleeping for a long time, there might be like not great weight gain, right? When do you think, I mean, this is something I should talk later, but since we are already in this, when do you think it's a good time to not feed the baby or wake up the baby to feed? Like we always say every 2 hours feed the baby. When do you think it's fine to not do that?
This highlights that sleep doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? The way we approach sleep, it's almost like we can compartmentalize and separate it, and we just need to do this
Mm-hmm.
strategy here, right?
Yeah.
And everything else we don't have to worry about. And that's simply not true, because eating and
Mm-hmm.
sleeping for the first, I would even say for the first year or so, is very closely intertwined. For the brand new baby, so I'm speaking just
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like I don't want to misinform your listeners, but the baby is born at a certain birth weight. It is normal for their weight to decrease, up
Mm-hmm.
to 9-10%. But of course, we want to see the baby return back to their birth weight within a week or two. It really depends what their initial starting weight is.
Mm-hmm.
So once a baby surpasses their birth weight, we can allow the baby then to sleep longer stretches, if they'll do longer stretches
Mm-hmm.
overnight, right? So do know that in the first 3 months, just a little bit of baby biological design here, the first 3 months, the baby actually does not have a circadian rhythm, meaning they don't have day night cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is so that they're waking frequently to feed. However, some babies, I call these the magical babies, will start to do longer stretches kind of overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if the sleep environment is dark. Um, and we do have to keep in mind, in 24 hours, the baby does need to eat. They are required to eat, a certain amount. They can't skip meals. It's not like adults. If I skip a meal or don't eat as much today, I can make up for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
No such thing with a baby, right? So
Yeah.
again, we have to keep the feeding schedule for 24 hours until they surpass their birth weight. Once they surpass their birth weight, if they'll do longer stretches, that's fine. Parents don't have to wake them up. However, we still need to get the same amount of food into the baby, right? So newborn eats about around 8 to 12 times in 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do the math, if they do longer stretches overnight, then during the day we need to make sure they're keeping on their feeding schedule, right? And sometimes that's difficult as well, because in addition to the sleep piece of it, especially for those who are breastfeeding, we know that's another learning cliff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Breastfeeding, and it's very easy for us professionals to say like, oh, you just do this and this, but for the parents, when it comes to actual practicalities of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, wake the baby, feed the baby, change the baby. Oh, wake window is done, and
Yeah.
get the baby back to sleep. It's the actual doing of it can be very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are the general guidelines, is you waiting until the baby surpasses their birth weight.
Got There's so many methodologies that are on the internet, and new parents are actually following. And Ferber and Cry It Out is two main, like most I've heard of, right? So I want to talk about that. I want the listeners to know that this is not to shame any parent. We are just having a discussion for educating parents. If you are someone who chose this method and that worked for you and you're completely fine with it, that's completely okay. But there are a lot of parents who are in the confusion of whether or not to choose this or not, or whether or not it's something that they want to do with their baby, right? So this episode is solely for the parents to learn about it. And I want to understand what is happening when we try to train the baby with the cry it out method versus Ferber. Let's kind of, understand the science behind baby's mental health. What's going on when we try these methods?
Yeah, so absolutely. Try to provide a judgment-free space when working with families and talking about these sort of things, because it can create a lot of division for sure. Mostly because people feel bad or guilty, or they're not sure what to make of all the information.
Mhm.
So let's see here. So these kinds of sleep training methods, I do want to say, if someone is even considering them, you definitely want to wait until it is, I guess, medically appropriate, right? So we had just talked about, making sure the baby has gained their weight, surpassed their weight. Definitely not within the first 3 months. I mean, personally, I don't include cried out or forced separation methods,
Mhm.
but you definitely want to wait until it is, I guess, medically safe to do so, because a baby might be going a long period without eating. That said, to get to the heart of your question, what's going on? Um, so cried out, Ferber, extinction, these are methods where a baby is left to be by themselves for a period of time.
Mhm.
So, the original cried out, and I still hear parents they're getting this advice from the pediatrician. Oh, just put the baby in their, nursery at 7 p.m. and don't go back inside until 7 a.m. I still hear that parents are getting this advice today, which is very shocking, because please know that pediatricians actually don't receive any training to give sleep advice. So do know number one. Um, so these methods, they sort of market themselves as like you're learning the baby's learning to self-soothe. Okay. So I want to get into the basics here. So self-soothing is actually like, what is self-soothing? It's actually self-regulation, right? So self-soothing means as an adult, I can recognize I'm in distress or that I have a need
Mhm.
that needs to be met. And then I'm able to calm myself down, reassure myself I'm going to be okay, that kind of thing. When I say this out loud, a little baby cannot do that. Okay, so do understand it is the a young child is not even just limited to babies, but a young child is actually not really able to effectively self-regulate for the first, handful of years. Okay, so we're looking at the big picture here. Um, and so what we sort of have things backwards in our Western approach to parenting. So the nervous system, the brain, it actually in the young child, in the little baby, they actually need to be co-regulated. They
Mm.
need another calm adult to help regulate the child. Okay, so we call this co-regulation. So I like to tell parents, you are the co-regulation training wheels for your child. And we understand this with other physical skills, right? So if we want our child to learn how to ride a bike, we wouldn't say, oh, first learn to ride the bike and then we'll put the training wheels on. Right? I mean, that sounds silly, right?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah,
first, we're going to throw you into the pool and then I'm going to teach you how to swim. We don't do that, doesn't make sense.
doesn't
Right?
make
And
sense. Yeah.
so the nervous system, this immature nervous system, what happens is in the first, handful of years, it learns what it feels like to be regulated, to be helped being regulated. And then when it's able to effectively do it itself, we're talking closer to 7 years of age. It's quite a long time, right? 7 years
Yeah.
of age, then, the nervous system is mature enough to understand, what's happening and do it on its own. Okay. Um, so that's kind of like the ground information. Then babies, in the first year of life, they are trying to form attachments.
Mhm.
An attachment is connection, right? It's forming connection, it's forming trust ultimately, right? So in pregnancy, your baby didn't have to think about being fed or being warm or being comforted. All that was happening for the baby. After the baby is born, suddenly they're having to ask to be fed. They're having to ask to be comforted, right? And this asking
Mhm.
is crying,
Mhm.
basically. And so the parents are then the baby expects that they're going to be responded to. And in pregnancy, our brains change, right? So for the pregnant person, for the new parent, the oxytocin that's, responsible for starting labor, also responsible for feelings of love, it's actually
Mhm.
changing our brains to tune in to our baby. So this is why, like you talked about, you just want to hold your baby all day long. I can't
Yeah.
imagine, that's what pregnancy and childbirth did.
Mhm.
It changed our brains to then really want to hone in and take care of our baby, right? So the baby's expecting this, and our brains are wired to attend to our baby. When a baby is left alone, right? They're gonna, because like I said, in the first year, they want to form attachments, and they do so by physical means, meaning they want to be held, they want to see you, they want to hear you, they want to smell you, hear your heartbeat. Breastfeeding, facilitates this sort of thing. So if a baby's left alone and they cry, they expect to be attended to right away. If they're not attended to within, a period of time, and it's a rather short period of time, this does increase the stress response. So they do get stressed. In the context of sleep, right? Sleep is for the baby is like a form of separation, even though you're literally with the baby, but the baby sort of sense as a form of separation because it's dark. They're not really interacting with you, but they want to sense that you're close by. And so if the baby is alone in the middle of the night, wakes up crying, and they're not attended to right away, this triggers the stress response. Okay.
Mhm.
The stress response, it's like putting on the alarm bells, right? The alarm bells in your nervous system, and it takes up a lot of energy and resources, right? It's very energy intensive. So it cannot actually go on for very long. So what happens is in order to conserve itself, things will then shut down, right? So if because we can't, have the alarms go on
Yeah.
because it'll take up too much energy and resources. So things will shut down. And so we will see this as the child falling asleep or, the child withdrawing inward. And so, yes, on the outset, we see that the baby has fallen asleep, or the baby has fallen asleep, and we think, oh, yes, this is success. The baby has fallen asleep. But the baby hasn't learned anything, and the baby did not self-soothe,
Yeah.
right? What happened was the baby was upset, cried, expected someone to come to them, but after a while, as adults, we know this, right? If we are calling out for help and no
Yeah.
one comes to us, then we're going to stop.
Yeah.
And so what's happened, everything shuts down and then they do fall asleep, right? And so, but the baby has not learned and they have not self-soothed. So it is a little bit of a lie to call that self-soothing. And then over time, because parents will say like, oh, well, now I don't have to do all the, intensive associations I had to do, like the rocking or feeding to sleep, because the baby has gotten used to that. They have
Mm.
gotten used to like the cry in this context because they sort of get conditioned, right? They do learn. Their system learns by conditioning
Yeah.
through routine, predictability. They
Mm-hmm.
learn like, okay, in this context, if I wake up, no one's come, no, no one's coming. This is all subconscious, of course. They are not conscious of this. So then, yes, they continue to sleep. But like I said, we do not want to mistake this as that they've learned something
Hmm.
or that they've acquired this skill suddenly to self-soothe because
Yeah.
they're biologically unable to do that.
Mm-hmm. It breaks my heart. Honestly, Dr. Yvonne, us being adults also, sometimes when we are really sad and upset, we need someone to come and tell us
Oh
too
yeah,
that
that's
everything is gonna be fine, don't worry. I know how many times I am on the verge of crying. I would sit with my husband and I'll say, I just need a hug maybe today, okay? And also, let's just remember that this is only for a short period of time that we are gonna be so invested and we'll be sleep deprived, we'll be exhausted, we'll be tired. But I think, Dr. Yvonne, what we choose to do now is gonna kind of affect the years later on in the baby's life too, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but we are kind of setting the foundation that, okay, you're crying, nobody's gonna come to help you. You have to just figure it out.
yeah. Bring a balanced sort of approach to this because,
Sure.
I'm sure some people are listening up to this point feel really bad. And
Yes.
remember,
Yeah.
even me, we did cry at one point, and I just want to tell the parents out there that bonding, connection, attachment, it's ongoing and it's
Hmm.
24/7, right?
True.
So,
Yeah.
so this is why I approach sleep challenges as parenting challenges,
Mm-hmm.
right? If parents are parenting, if you're parenting your child in a way that promotes like healthy attachment, I don't believe that like if you go through a period where maybe you were desperate, because people do this out of desperation. I would
True.
like to think nobody decides to do, cry it out of funsies. Or let's
Mm-hmm.
just try
Yeah.
this, thing.
Yeah.
And I think some people think that's what I'm expected to do, right? But it's on, parenting bonding is 24/7. That said, looking at again, you don't want to look at things in a vacuum. That said, when I work with families, especially with an older child, we're talking about, when I say older, like 1 to 3 years of age, I'll have some families who did do cry it out when the baby was younger. And it did work, quote unquote. But now that the child is older, that doesn't work anymore. Right. And, so back to the whole thing. If the baby truly learned self-soothing, then why are we still having issues when your 1 to 3 year old doesn't want to sleep by themselves, right? And you try to cry it out and it makes it worse, right? So in those cases, I do educate parents. This is now a parenting approach. Because like you said, even as adults, if I went to someone, I'm crying, I'm so upset about something, and that person said, okay, well, I'm just going to leave you alone. I'll come back in 3 hours, or something.
Yeah.
I'll be like, what?
I'll
The
be like,
like
I don't need you in my life if you can't support me. You
It's
can
like
just go,
what
go,
the
go.
exactly, right? Or some of the other methods I hear out
Mm.
there. There's the chair method or something where you just sit there. The baby's crying, the parent sits there, but like you don't interact with the baby, right? Again, if I'm upset, I'm crying, someone comes and just sits there looking at me, not interacting. I'm like, what? This is, that is
Yeah.
not helpful either. So
Yeah.
if I do want to balance things out, that yes, we understand the truth about cry it out and what it does, but I never want parents to think like if this is something they've actually used before or they tried out, like I don't want parents to think like, oh, I've damaged my child now for
Yeah.
life because
Yeah.
it's what you do all the rest of the time as well,
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of thing. So I just sort of wanted to put it out there again, just so people don't feel guilty if this is something they've had to do or they're even entertaining, because some people actually feel guilty because they're even entertaining
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
idea.
Let's assume somebody used the method like 5, 6 months ago, and now they think like, okay, I want to correct this. There's parents who think like, okay, I did this, and now I feel like I shouldn't have done this. Can I correct it?
Absolutely. So a real important part of parenting and something to model with kids is something we call repair. You as parents, you're humans. We are allowed to make mistakes. Right? You're allowed to
Absolutely.
make
Yeah.
mistakes. You're allowed to do something and realize, oh man, that was something I should not have done. And now this has caused distress in my child, distress in me, and has this impacted our relationship, and my child's well-being. Then the repair part's really important. Then it's important to, if the child is older, to apologize, even apologizing to babies, right? Just go modeling this behavior, this communication with them, because babies do sense energy and intent. So, if that's something you did in the past, you can apologize to your baby. So sorry we did that to you. And I think that in itself can be very healing. Um, but repair is a really important part of bonding. So don't feel like, I don't want parents to ever feel like, oh, I can never make mistakes. Because you're going to make a lot of mistakes,
Yeah.
So I do work with families where there may be a difference of opinion between parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do this education part. I do explain, what's actually happening with crying out. Like, yes, you get a child that may sleep, but this is the exchange why, right?
Hmm.
And going forward, as they get older, that is not going to work. Like cry it out will not work in an older baby or child, and it can actually backfire. It can actually make the whatever sleep challenges they had worse.
Dr. Evan, did you have any clients, like any parents who came back to you after months or like a couple years that the baby is not sleeping anymore, where they had initially did the cry it out method?
Oh yes, yeah,
So then
yep.
again, what is the use of this method if anyway the baby, we have to circle back to, looking at a different technique? Then is it really worth it to do this, or we could just give some more time to ourselves and the baby and, try gentler methods? So clearly this is not making the baby learn anything, because we are back to square one when the baby becomes a toddler.
Yes. Right. And this is why I don't include it, because I work with families and there are other methods that do work that still preserve, that trust building,
Mm-hmm.
in the relationship, which is ultimately, the baby sleep industry, and I know I'm part of this too. Baby sleep industry, they kind of say like, oh, the baby has to learn to self-soothe, learn to sleep. That's
Yeah.
actually not what's happening, right? The baby's actually learning to trust. They're learning to trust that they're going to be okay sleeping without being held, being rocked, sleeping alone, for the whole
Yeah.
night. But like I said, in the beginning, two things are true, right? The baby, yeah, is not designed to sleep well, but the adult is designed with a sleep requirement.
Mhm.
And we do know that ongoing, sleep deprivation can contribute to mood disorders, depression, the higher rates of depression, anxiety. And so this is real fine balance, right? And like I said, this is actually the consequence of not having a village where, and so in some ways, we've been lied to. We've been lied to saying parents should be able to do this all by ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we set these impossible standards,
Mm-hmm.
right? The standard of your baby, you need to work on having your baby sleep throughout the night by themselves in a separate room. right?
Mm-hmm.
That is the Western standard.
Yeah.
And that is impossible. And when we can't meet that standard, it just erodes our sense of parenting, like our confidence in ourselves. And again, I understand I'm kind of part of this, but we've got a culture that kind of relies on other experts, right? And so I want that instinct to still be back to the parents. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
parents to rely on me. Like if I
Yeah.
do a sleep consult, I actually want it to be so they don't need to keep coming back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not a good model.
A lot of people, a lot of new parents don't have a village. They are living far away, no family members around. And so if you can have a postpartum doula that could support you in during the nights or whatever you prefer in the daytimes, that could also help them get sleep. Like just leaving the baby, in a different room is not the only solution. Sometimes there are different, I mean, if you can afford, why not just have a postpartum doula? That's almost like a village to you.
Yeah, getting help in other areas. Because like I said, parenting doesn't happen in a vacuum. Everything's not compartmentalized. Because chances are the same parent, which, let's be honest, is usually mom, doing everything else, right? Feeding, also managing the household,
Hmm.
chores, food, that sort of thing. Fortunately, a lot of the families we work with, partners also helping, but at some point, partner has to go back to work. So yeah, if you can get postpartum doula, great. Not everyone can access that, but even things like meal service, grocery shopping, prepping, cooking, cleaning up,
Itself is
that's
a lot.
a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a lot. If
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I do encourage families to see what they can access in terms of getting the additional help. Because yeah, it's not just the sleep they're dealing with, it's everything else.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Yvonne, there's a lot of things going around with some pediatricians and some scientists who are talking about not sleep training the baby under the age one. Now, I do understand that there are parents who are going back to work, or some of them just want to do it because that's the best thing for them to do. I want us to talk about how early we can and what's the safe time to do so, and then kind of dive deep into the topic where I'm talking about scientists mentioning to not do it under the age one. What's really happening? Why are they talking about it?
Okay. Uh, so when someone comes to me and says like, when can I sleep train a child? I always put it back to them like, what do you mean by sleep training?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a very general term, right?
Yeah.
And they'll just basically what they're saying to me, the parents want more sleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because again, baby's actually designed to do light sleep. They're okay. They're okay. And if I had someone who could wake up, if the parent had someone who woke up every time the baby woke up overnight, they would actually be okay, right? They wouldn't actually consult me. In any case, so if we go with like the actual like baby, what we can expect with baby sleep, I had said the first 3 months, the baby does not have a circadian rhythm and everything is geared towards, growth, right? So definitely not before 4 months, not before 4 months, because that baby is eating frequently. By the time the child is around 4 to 6 months, their stomach is a lot bigger. All right, their stomach is bigger. They're able to go longer periods without eating. And we're talking about the healthy baby who does not have medical needs, right? Obviously, if there are medical needs, those should be attended to, or they're sick or um, have pain like teething, digestive issues, like those should all be addressed first
Okay.
before
So by
before sleep.
medical needs, we are talking about if a baby is a reflux baby, if baby is
Exactly.
having any other issues going on. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So sometimes, because if a baby's in pain, like, if parents tell me, I had a previously good sleeper, but now they're waking up frequently, the first and foremost thing we want to determine is there pain, right? Is there
Okay.
pain, right? And if there is pain, that needs to be addressed. You should definitely not sleep train or
Mm-hmm.
address the sleep until that's been solved.
Okay.
So between 4 to 6 months, yeah, baby has a larger capacity. That startle reflex, right? The newborn, I like to do this cheerleading hands kind of thing, it goes away
Mm-hmm.
usually by 4 months.
Yeah.
And they're able to now consolidate their sleep cycles, like do connect one sleep cycle to the other, kind of thing. Unfortunately, what also happens between 4 to 6 months is developmental leaps, right? There are lots of new developments. And if you recall, I was saying that just increases the circulation activity of the nervous system. And so people who had a previously good sleeper, right? If you had a magical baby for the first 3 months who actually slept well, a previously good sleeper will become a bad sleeper during this time, right? People read about sleep regression.
Yeah.
And a previously bad sleeper will just become a worse sleeper. So that was our case. She was not that great a sleeper in the beginning, but yeah, 4 to 6 months. Oh my gosh, it was just awful. It was just awful. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
that time, the if parents have used certain associations or certain, yeah, let's just say call them associations or routines to put the baby to sleep. And I would say the four strongest associations are feeding, holding, motion, and pacifier, right? Over time, these things may not be sustainable for the parents. And I like to say there's no such thing as a bad sleep association. So again,
Mm-hmm.
baby sleep industry will say, oh, don't use sleep crutches, accidental parenting, what have you.
Don't
Like
feed the
that's
baby to sleep is one that I hear a lot.
right. So that's all BS, right? There's no such thing as a bad sleep association. Like you're just attending to the baby. From the
Yeah.
baby's point of view, it's amazing. It's
Oh,
amazing to
yeah.
be held and rocked and
Hmm.
sleep. I mean, like I would love to be rocked to
Yeah.
sleep, eating to
Yeah.
sleep. But for the parents, it's not sustainable because what might have taken 10 minutes of rocking as the baby, is going through these developmental leaps now needs 30, 40 minutes plus of rocking, and the baby's still waking frequently because their nervous system's just so active. And
Hmm.
so this is the time, this is the most common time parents do reach out to me for help. And so I don't like to call it sleep training. I just like to call it changing the associations, right? So
Hmm.
parents have the right to put boundaries, right? You have the right to change things. It's not sustainable. It's overall not healthy because, adults need sleep. Um, but the baby is allowed to protest. The baby's allowed to protest. So then the parent understands they need to then support the baby during that emotional protest, right? And so we make changes, the baby may not like it. So it's not so much the baby might not cry or be upset. Of course, we try to make things that are as gentle as possible. And we do take into consideration the child's temperament. Some babies are quite sensitive, some babies are quite easygoing. One is not better than the other, they're just different, right? So we always want to take in consideration the child's temperament. If a parent tells me, and parents know, right? They tell me like, yeah, my baby seems to be sensitive. They don't like transitions. They're really attached to me. They get really upset. They were a colicky baby, things like that. Then whatever changes we want to make, we may need to do it much more gradually versus the more easygoing baby. And I do get families with easygoing babies, and the parents did not realize like, oh, I can change how we're doing. Like they were kind of afraid actually, maybe to not rock the baby or something like that. And again, they just need someone to help guide them on how to do that in a way that, helps the child build trust
Mm-hmm.
and but at the same time, allows the parent to make the changes and understanding, yeah, I'm still supporting my child. I'm never going to leave them alone, right? The child needs to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
in expressing all their emotions, right? Not just the happy ones, but the upset ones, right? Expressing all their emotions, knowing that their parents will support them no matter what. So again, sounds like parenting, general
Yeah.
parenting, right? So yeah, I would say around the 4 to 6 month is usually very reasonable to want to, try to change the sleep associations.
But do you have any thoughts on the hype going on about not doing it under 1 year though?
Oh yes, yes. So when you say sleep training, you're talking about like the typical cried out Ferber extinction, that kind of thing?
It could be like anything, just making the baby sleep by themselves, irrespective of whatever method we are using. I like the way you put your approach into words, which is like child led. I really love that how you mention it. It's a child led, no separation approach. I think that it's like a healthy way of doing it, and I don't think there's any way to not do it under 1 year. But I'm just trying to understand what is the reason of not using these other approaches under 1 year, and why are we hearing from a lot of pediatricians and neuroscientists that under 1 year of age you should not do that. So what is really going on with the, from the development aspect or the emotional aspect, what's going on with the baby exactly?
So yes, I like to, sleep should be, yeah, child-led, family-centered, right? So what's developmentally appropriate for the child. So in terms of the first year, um, the child is, trying to make connections, forming attachments, and I had mentioned briefly they do this by physical means.
Hmm.
Like physically, they want to physically be with you. And if you think about the first 9 months, like the baby was in the uterus, during pregnancy, literally attached to you for 9 months, right? And so even the idea of wanting the child to sleep alone by themselves, in a crib in a separate room, for a period, like they've been alive outside shorter
Hmm.
than inside, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it earlier than, 9, 10 months, for
Hmm.
example, like they haven't been even been outside for that long. So anyways, they attach by physical means in the first year. So that is probably the basis of why people are changing their minds around, having them be separate in the first year. But yes, the recommendation is, baby sleeps in the parents' room for at least the first 6 months, up to a year. I have families that the child is parents and children are sleeping either in the parents' room or in the child's room. They're transitioning to the child's own room.
Hmm.
Yeah, for the first like 2 years or so. A lot of families are doing that, that I've noticed. And so yeah, I would say that's the basis of why, and that because emotionally that's how they form attachments, right? And if we try to separate them, make them independent too soon, too early,
Hmm.
it you know it can impact their need for attachment because that's the child's number one priority. Right? I like to say from the parents' point of view, our priorities are sleep, the child's eating enough, it's healthy, safe, that sort of thing. From the young child's point of view, they don't really care. They're not thinking, oh, I had crap sleep last night. I really got to make up for it today. Or oh, I was too distracted,
Hmm.
with eating yesterday. I should really focus on eating because parents will
Yeah.
tell me 4 to 6 months, baby's distracted from breastfeeding.
Hmm.
They're not thinking about that at all. Their driving, their driving force is to build connection, fill their attachment bucket. I like to say they wake up every day with an empty attachment bucket and they want to fill that up as the day goes on, with bonding and also practice their new skills. And that's their MO. The rest of it they just assume is being taken care of, that parents are going to do that, right? So we want to make sure that the baby gets those needs fulfilled, right? The attachment. And so again, the first year is physically, so we don't want to do too many things that are going to force the baby to be independent.
Okay, now it's a very interesting thing I wanted to ask you. There's so many apps out there, and I don't want to name any app here, but there's a couple apps which help us track the wake window and the nap time for babies. And then parents are constantly getting stressed on how long of a nap should the baby have, how many naps in a day. There's like a chart they are following, right? Baby's
Yeah.
4 months, okay, they should have like 3 naps at least. Now baby's 7 months, baby's still napping 3 times, but the chart says it should be two.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts? Do you think we have to follow these things, new parents have to go by the charts, or let the baby do their own thing? A lot of parents are following 7 to 7. I don't know when I'm going to be able to do that, or even if I should do that or not. I'm not thinking about it,
Possible? Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I just do what is working for my baby. He's happy doing that. I'm okay. So what's going on? Is that something that is really helpful for parents? And then the nap time. Is there any number of naps according to the age that has to be followed?
Right. I like to tell parents, like in terms of babies, like when babies are first born, there is a much wider range of personality types, temperaments, and whatnot than we see in adults,
Mm.
right? Which means
Yeah.
their needs are very individual. And then whatever, society or culture they grow up in, they quickly learn about it. But in any
Yeah.
case, so when it comes to sleep schedules and whatnot, like I kind of use them as a very loose guideline.
Mm.
I worked with all kinds of families, and some families, like at the two extremes, some families are 100% baby led, meaning no apps are out the window. We don't
Mm.
track anything. We just wake when the baby wakes, sleep when the baby sleeps,
Gonna take my
that
hand up.
that sort of thing. That's totally fine if
Mm.
it works for you, right? Like I said, there's no such thing as bad associations. There's really no shoulds as long as it works for you. On the other end of the spectrum, I have worked with families where every single minute of the day is accounted for. It's quite literally, we start bedtime at 6:51, we read books until 7:05, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I feel like, something in the middle is kind of nice, like at
Mm-hmm.
some point, structure in a day does like it helps adults because it
Yeah.
kind of helps to so you can plan things and make things a bit more
Mm.
predictable. And it can also help establish a bit of a rhythm for the baby. But at the same time, because the baby is going through so much development, right, in the first handful of years, like
Mm-hmm.
there is a built-in element of unpredictability. And so the apps I find they can be useful. Some parents really like to track things, but I've had parents tell me that apps actually cause more stress. Like they
Mm.
don't want to be on their phones in the middle of the night tracking, I'm
Yeah.
breastfed on
Yeah.
the right side for 5 minutes and,
Oh my
baby,
God, I can't
you know,
even imagine. Yeah, that's too much.
and when my kids were babies, this was pre-apps. Like,
Mm.
things have changed so much in the last 5, 10 years. But I did come across a journal I had. It was the sleep log. And honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I read it and I'm like, oh my God, this is like insane. I was writing all the minutia, like 2:52 a.m. woke up, 2 or 3:05, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. And I was just like, oh man, this is insane. Like how, you get into the spiral or rabbit hole,
Yeah.
kind of it. So yeah, I do have mixed feelings about the apps. And again, I think it leads us instead of relying on our own parenting instincts, right, and building our own confidence as parents, it it can actually take away from that, right? Where now we're just relying on again experts
Mm-hmm.
and the information is always changing, right? And
Yeah.
things that will
Yeah.
that will work for some babies may not work for this baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I do see that, like for example, I sometimes have families who tell me my baby's night bedtime is so late, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., but I read my baby's bedtime should be, this is a newborn, should be 6:30 or 7, which seems impossible. I'm like, okay, well, any bedtime is fine, but what time is your baby up for the day? What time is your baby like in the morning? What time, is your baby awake and you start your day? And those families will tell me, oh, well, it's like 9:30, 10 a.m. I was like, okay, well, with a 9:30, 10 a.m. wake up, then yeah, a reasonable bedtime for your baby would be 10 p.m., 10:30,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of thing. Now, if they told me, and this is where that personalization comes in, and this is where we realize there are a lot of outliers, and so it's not just follow the app, follow the chart, do these things. So yeah, I was working with a family who was trying to reinforce the 7, 8 p.m. bedtime. Baby was not in this, like, oh my gosh, we can't get the baby, baby's wide awake, baby won't sleep. And yeah, just asked a couple basic questions and realized, well, the baby's is up for the day at 9 a.m. They're not ready to sleep until 9 p.m. Let's make it easy on you and don't, unless you want the baby to wake up earlier. Like, do you want a 6:30, 6 a.m., 7 a.m. wake up? And they're like, oh, no, no, we like sleeping in. I'm like, then it's totally fine. Because as time goes on, that bedtime will get earlier as the child
Okay.
starts dropping naps and whatnot, right? And so that's kind of
Yeah.
like a example I see a few times where, yeah, families are trying so hard to fit into what their app tells them or what the books
Hmm.
tell them or blogs or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, when in the end it was like, oh, I just need to pay attention to my baby.
Yeah.
My baby's telling me like these are the times
Mm-hmm.
they're sleeping.
I just wonder, whenever I used to tell my mom, like, there's an app for this or there's a website I can refer to, and she's like, we raised babies without these apps, and you guys did amazing. We did amazing as parents too. And I said, yeah, that's right. So, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, when our parents were, new parents, they also did an amazing job. So, I think the more information that we load into our brains, I think kind of becomes more overwhelming. And yes, it's good to use these resources that are available just to have a better understanding, but then kind of not push yourself to do something because that particular app is telling you to do, or another parent is saying that it worked for them, right? Kind of just go by your own instincts, and also baby's instinct, right? We cannot just push baby like, this is the time I want you to eat, come on, eat. This is the time I want you to
Yeah.
sleep, just sleep.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Another very important thing, Dr. Ivan, is we already spoke about, you said, I don't consider any association as a bad association. But what do you think about the nighttime feeding? Because some babies just get so used to it. And then this is a case of a mom who started co sleeping. It just happens to be after the vaccination. She mentioned to me that, my baby was fussy and I just wanted to give the comfort and I was co sleeping. And then it happens to be that they ended up just co sleeping every night. And she's completely fine with it though. She said that how I feel like my baby just wakes up and turns towards me for feeding. So I think that they are kind of relying on getting fed when they wake up and then falling back asleep. So, what do you think? What's going on? Is that fine to do so, or this is something that it'll change after some time?
Right. So my first question is always like, are you okay with it?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when families reach out to me, it's because they aren't okay, or it's really because they're not able to sleep, right? Sometimes the babies and parents are waking each other up, or the mom really, really can't sleep and she's really not, coping well with that. But I do still ask, like, you're doing this overnight. How do you feel about it? And
Mm-hmm.
yes, some parents will say like, "Oh, I'm totally okay with the breastfeeding to sleep. I actually like it. Um, I just don't want to, but it's 6 times at night, you know."
Yeah.
And depending on the child's age, I'll say like, "Okay, well, for this age, generally speaking, it's, we can reasonably expect, I'm just gonna use a random number, we expect 2 times a night." And
Hmm.
so it's a lot of it's always a conversation. Like, are you
Okay.
okay with this? Like the big
True.
question is, am I okay with this? I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what the again, taking safety into consideration, of course, but I don't care what the doctor says. I don't care what my neighbor said, or my aunt, or whoever, who are not even qualified to give sleep advice. Am I okay with it? And some parents will say, yeah, I'm actually okay with it, but can we reduce the frequency?
Hmm.
Sometimes it's the frequency. Um, well, that's kind of my first question, right? It's like, what are you okay with? What do you want to change?
Hmm.
Again, it's family centered. I want families to build their own sense of confidence in trusting their own choices, decisions, and how they want to do things, rather than me saying, "Oh, you should do this, this, and this," right? Um, so yeah, I don't see any problem with that, but unless it's really impacting the parents, like I can't
Parents.
sleep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or I suppose on the flip side, um, if depending on the age of the baby, like some babies get very, as they get older, they're very distracted. They've got FOMO, right? Life's really exciting and eating is boring. And so parents will tell me, like, oh, my baby's getting really distracted from breastfeeding during the day. And so then what happens is the child decides, I'm going to do all my feeding at night. And to
Yeah.
me, that's not sustainable. To me, it's like
Hmm.
that would be a situation, to change just for everyone's well-being, because
Mm-hmm.
yes, the child should be eating during, doing all their eating during the day. So you can see it's highly individual. Like you can't just simply say, "Oh, no, no, you can't do this or do that." Like it's
True.
really
Yeah.
important to do the detective work to see like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what's happening? And then of course the input from families like, what are you okay with and what do you want to change?
Yeah, it's it's like looking at the whole situation holistically. And again, every baby's patterns are different. If we cannot just think of the sleep part, right? Well, we have to also see what's happening during the day, like you said. And even being adults, if we have like a heavy lunch or like heavy supper, we don't want to eat in the night, right? So maybe kind of, I'm thinking like if the baby is eating enough during the day, they might not need a lot of feeding in the night. And then also, if they are waking up too much, it could be related to, them not getting enough calories during the day.
Oh yes, no, I definitely see that is sometimes the case. Um,
Would you direct the
yeah.
parent to a lactation consultant in this situation, maybe?
Yeah, so it depends on the age of the baby.
Hmm.
If the baby has not started solids yet and there's
Mm-hmm.
feeding issues, especially in the newborn stage, that first 2, 3 months, then most certainly, like we cannot really address sleep properly if there are ongoing breastfeeding issues, if the baby has a tongue tie, that kind of thing. Once a child, like in terms of waking up, it's actually normal for a
Mm-hmm.
child to wake up even at the age of 2 or 3 to have a snack, right? Anytime the child goes through a growth spurt, breastfeeding, I
Yeah.
mean, a breastfeeding baby, because suddenly they just want to eat all the time, right? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to up level your breast milk production,
Mm-hmm.
if they're exclusively breastfed. In a child who's on solids, right? So we're talking about like older than 6 months, toddler, even to 3 years, they go through growth spurts as well, right? Developmental leaps. And sometimes, yeah, they wake up in the middle of the night wanting a snack. And that is also still very normal.
So babies will wake up not just during this stage, but also when they're toddler. It's something that can happen anytime. So I would just say better not stress about it. Just see how it goes. See what your baby
I want to
likes.
discourage the
Yeah.
listeners, your audience who have just
Yeah.
the new baby who think like, okay, by 8 months they'll be sleeping through the night. I mean,
Yeah. I
it's
know.
it's never a straight line, right? It's kind of
So
like,
many
you
moms
know,
ask me, like, I have another lovely mom just right across from here, and she is in that newborn phase right now. And she said, like, when did you start getting sleep? When did your baby start sleeping through the night? And I said, okay, let me be honest with you. My baby was a good sleeper when he was just 2.5 months old. He was giving me 5 hours of stretch. But is that happening now? Absolutely not. It's not happening. It's not the same anymore. And
yeah.
that's a healthy thing. Like you mentioned, they are having so many developmental, aspects going on, and then it keeps making them wake up all the time. So it's not. I know moms with newborns are listening right now. They would think like, okay, so is it never? No, it's not like that. You will get to sleep more, but I think the more we stress about this, the lesser chance that will happen, right? I was not even thinking that my baby will sleep through the night so early. My husband just returned back to work, and I was like, such a good boy. He knows that dad is back to work and he's sleeping through the night, giving us long stretches.
Happy. Yeah.
And then comes 4 months. And from 4 months, now he's 6 months, it's still the same. He wakes up, right? And which is fine with us. We are, again, for me, I just want to kind of keep it like baby led, but also having like a balance that it should not create a pattern that he's gonna be too tired, right? Oh, from tired, Dr. Evan, I remember moms talking that the baby is getting so fussy and so tired that they are not able to fall asleep. And this I've seen also when we were out. He would be so fussy, and he like, because he's too tired, it's so difficult to put them to sleep. What happens? Like, is there any fix?
No, like
What's happening?
so so that's being overtired, right? When the child is overtired, it actually triggers a stress response. It's actually a stress
Hmm.
for them, right? So if we think about 24 hours, like overnight sleep, they do cumulative, sleep overnight. And then in the daytime they have naps. And the naps really serve to help them get through the day without being overtired because the daytime
Hmm.
is just so stimulating, right? It's new discoveries, new skills, new cognitive awareness and whatnot. And so they need those naps, right, just to kind of like help restore themselves. And so if they get overtired, they're overstimulated by what was happening before. And so being overtired is a stress. It triggers a stress response. So it's like adults. If I have a
Yeah.
very stressful day, for example, but I'm so exhausted. It's been a long, stressful day. I'm tired but wired. And I can't just simply roll into bed and like fall asleep. Like I need to wind down,
Mm.
I need my sleep routine kind of thing. So same with babies. They can be, again, depends on the sensitivity of the baby. Some babies are very sensitive, right? Like if there are visitors that come in the evening, oh, that's it. They're not going to, it's going to be, they need a lot more help. Remember that co-regulation, right?
Yeah.
They'll need more help to get settled.
Hmm.
Even with laid back babies, right? They can get overtired as well. You just may not see the signs until they're very overtired, right? So
True.
even with the easygoing babies, parents will say, "Oh yeah, they're easygoing," but if you try to stretch it too much, there is a kind of like a breaking point.
Yeah.
They're overtired and suddenly they won't sleep. What it means is they actually need a lot more help
Hmm.
to be regulated, to settle down, and then help them stay asleep. Because oftentimes, because their nervous system's still very overactive,
Yeah.
we get what they call false starts. They fall asleep, but then they're awake
Hmm.
soon after. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. We want a life. Parents want a life, right? As adults, we want a life outside, and
Hmm.
that's what happens. It's like, okay, we stayed out a bit too long.
Dr. Evan, another thing that I wanted to ask you is typically about the Western society. Why do we keep hearing from people? And it's like it's a culture that they're pushing on new parents to sleep train the baby and, make the baby independent early. What is this independence that we are trying to instill in the baby, and why is it happening, especially in the Western culture?
Again, looking at this holistically, Western culture is very individualistic, right? We do things on our own. We're self-starters. We reward ambition and achievement and whatnot, and the whole idea of like a self-made person. When we know that's a lie, right? Nobody becomes successful all by themselves. It takes a village to nurture success. But in any case, so of course that's going to then now trickle down to parenting as well. But if you want to look at the origins, I mean, in terms of the history for the history nerds out there, uh, if we look at human societies and cultures, many, many, many centuries ago, millennia ago, we were nomadic, right? Traveling from place to place, and we always had our babies with us because it is not safe to leave a baby all by themselves, right? It's just like animals in general, right?
Mm.
The baby is with the mom, like for protection. And then eventually, when with the development of agriculture and whatnot, then we would settle into cities. And then around the time of the Industrial Revolution, right, factories and all this stuff, that would be the first time people would then be out of the home for long periods of time working shifts in factories. And this would then create the need for parents to sleep well so they can focus on these jobs, which were many of them were quite dangerous. Um, and so that's really where like the sleep training originated from. Sleep training originated from around the time of, Industrial Revolution, which is over, 100, more than 100 plus years ago. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, this would be the time before we even understood child psychology because they treated children as miniaturized adults. And we're also sending kids off to factories, right? So that's really where it all kind of originated from. Some of the sleep advice today originated from a time where we had to work long shifts and not based on child development, right? And Western society is like that. Like it's very based on the individual kind of thing. Of course, there's differences between, you know, countries and whatnot. Some countries are more like looking out, for the good of society than others. Whereas if we look at other cultures, right, around the world, they're more community centered or less individualistic. And that's where we'll see, that more village approach to child rearing, or, we'll see where families are sleeping all together for a long period of time. And this is what I love about living in Toronto and being in the GTA and working with all different families is that I see that being brought, like people will bring that with them.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we're living in a westernized, culture here, people will still bring these sort of sensibilities with them and they will say like, yeah, I want to, bed share or co-sleep, or I want the kids, I have parents say, I want my children to still sleep in the same room until they're 2, 3 years old kind of thing. But I do see a very big range, right? So that's, I mean, that's Western culture for you, right? It's always very individualistic, and we reward people who kind of do it all themselves. I mean, even being parents,
Mhm.
right? This idea like we can do it all, have a full-time job, run our household, raise our children, and do all the right things perfectly all by ourselves, right? That is kind of, whether it's conscious or subconscious, kind of expectation we put upon ourselves.
Before we wrap up this episode, Dr. Ivan, there's one last thing that I want to talk about. We did talk about the cry it out method and how it affects the babies. They are not really learning anything. Instead, the stress hormone really skyrockets and things like that. But what happens when a parent chooses to bed share or co-sleep? We know that that is increasing the cortisol, but can we say that co-sleeping and contact napping and bed sharing could potentially be increasing the oxytocin and keeping the stress levels low for the baby?
For sure. It can also keep stress levels low for mom
Hmm.
as well,
Yeah.
right? For the parent who's breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a term out there called coined by James McKenna. So he's a real kind of I guess expert, to use the word, on what's called breast sleeping, right? So about like safe bed sharing, because we're gonna look at studies and whatnot. They show that the like the breastfeeding parent and baby, like they're really one unit,
Hmm.
right? They're one because, like, again, no such thing as a baby. It's a baby and someone. They're like one
Yeah.
unit, right? And
Yeah.
so cumulatively, the parent who is breastfeeding and also bed sharing, they actually get more sleep than a parent
Hmm.
who's breastfeeding and then trying to get their baby to sleep in a separate space.
Yeah.
But again, everyone's different, and sometimes we have situations where actually the bed sharing is not working because baby and parents are waking themselves up unnecessarily throughout the night. But I would say for most people, and especially in the early, like, newborn stage,
Hmm.
if they're co-sleeping, or it's honestly it's bed sharing, it can help facilitate breastfeeding. Also, the overall, like, cumulative sleep
And I
is
know that
more.
the Health Canada doesn't support bed sharing, but again, if we are doing it in a safe way, then why not, right?
Yeah. So yes. So this is where, like, public health and safety. If public health will use blanket statements, not
Hmm.
only in the areas of sleep and babies, but in other areas. And sometimes we think like, well, if we use common sense, or, consult properly with someone, you could do things a little bit differently. So with bed sharing, if you do a survey with families, somewhere between 60 to 80% of families do admit to bed sharing at some point, right? So even the families who are very adamant against it, they may end up doing it at some point because it's just very convenient. Like, it works with our biology and
Yeah.
design,
Yeah.
right? To want to, to sleep together. Um, but in terms of safety, if I'm putting a public message out there, it's very hard to put a message about safety where I can be sure that everyone's going to follow it, right? So
Hmm.
then they kind of use this, like, abstinence approach, which we know doesn't work, right? It does not work in, other areas, to say, like, oh, just simply don't do it, because then now we're not giving guidelines or properly consulting with families on how they can do it as safe as possible. So again, this is where, like, that individual approach is so important, because, like, if I oftentimes I'll go into a person's home, family's home, and see their sleep setup, and I will, point out, like they want a bed share or co-sleep. I will point out, like, oh, these things need to be, these safety, these are safety things that need to be addressed, kind of thing, to make it as safe as possible. And it is safer to plan for co-sleeping versus doing it accidentally, right? If you were like, oh, no, 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 I'm not going to do it, and then suddenly, you know, it's the second month of poor sleep and the baby's
Yeah.
on you, and then the baby falls off. Like, I do sometimes get
Hmm.
very frantic calls from parents like that happen, right? Like, they didn't want a bed share, or, whatever their setup was, and they'll say, like, oh, I was breastfeeding, I'm so tired, and the baby fell into, like, I'm sitting in the rocking chair, the baby fell into the chair or fell on the floor. Like,
Oh.
what do I
Yeah.
do? And they're just so frantic.
Yeah.
And that's really hard, because that also causes a lot of guilt too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I'm just trying to do the right thing. and
Mm-hmm.
follow these guidelines. And, I'm just so darn tired, and I could use stronger words. And this is what happened.
Well, Dr. Yvonne, thank you so much for joining me today and educating me and all the listeners on infant sleep. This was a very insightful conversation and I loved every bit of it. I'm sure the listeners would also enjoy this as much as I did. So, thanks a lot for giving me your time
Oh,
and it
absolutely,
was a lovely
my
chat.
pleasure. Yes, it was. Well, all the best to you and your baby and all to the parents out there. I know you're all doing a great job. You're doing a great job. It's hard. It's hard, and we want to recognize that. It's hard. It's hard no matter what you're facing, and even with help. So, kudos to all the parents. Just trying to make it through the day and
Yeah.
nights.